Hi everyone, welcome to this panel on unionizing the games and tech industries. Thanks to PAX Online and to EGX Digital for hosting us. It's kind of a shame that these events can't take place in the real world, but I think it's fair to say that unless these events were digital, we wouldn't have been able to get this panel together because we've got representatives from all over the world. So my name is Mike Saunders. I work for a trade union in Scotland called Prospect, and with me today we've got Amy Moran from FSU in Ireland, Emma Kinnemer and Wes McKenney from Code CWA, which is a part of the Communications Workers of America, and Carrie Lubeck from Uni Global in Switzerland, and Magnus Gerentz from Unionising in Sweden. So to give a little bit of context about this panel, the point is to talk about trade unions in the context of game studios and tech companies, to talk about what's going on so far, and to talk about why we're talking about unionization right now and organizing, and what's happening and why you should get involved and how to get involved wherever you are. So just to begin, what is happening in the games industry and why are we organizing now? I don't know if Carrie, if you want to start with that question.
Yeah, you can go first. So yeah, thanks, Mike. So first of all, gaming sector, it's huge and it's growing. So as we know, it's already bigger than movies and music combined. So of course, for us and for the workers, it's important that the workers get their share of the huge and growing profits, of course. As it's growing, there's also huge potential. And it's young, so the workers in games, it can be said that they're actually the future workforce, or already they are the workforce, but they are growing, and it's going to be important for the unions to have these new workers and especially like young people, immigrants, sexual minorities. Unions must have a democratic voice. And if unions want to be representative, they also have to include games employees. And of course, for games employees, it's also important for them to be in the union so that they can be represented. But most of all, basically, in the gaming sector, there are huge issues, and I'm sure the other participants can go much more into detail with those. But there's the unpaid overtime, there's the sexual harassment, this bro-centric toxic work environment in many big companies, discrimination going on. So there are issues that need solving, and it's in some cases it's similar to IT and tech companies, but of course there are huge variety of different jobs and different issues. So for us in the global union, it's important to create alliances between workers in different companies. And for example, when we start campaigning, it's essential that the game workers get their voices heard also, and their needs and aspirations. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, we've the reason we kind of started in Scotland was because there was this huge influx of money from the Scottish government for tech industries and games industries, and Edinburgh's become this kind of hub for tech and games in Europe. And we just noticed that although there's a huge amount of money and there's a huge amount of economic importance attributed to these companies, there was very little unionization throughout the sector. And there's in terms of economically, the tech and games industry is huge, but in terms of unionization, it's in the UK, it's second only to the hospitality industry in terms of how sparse the unionization is. And we just thought that was a really strange paradox, really, that the amount of money and the amount of people in this growing industry were just not being represented at all. And exactly as you say, Carrie, there's so many emerging issues that are only going to get bigger as the sector gets larger and larger. One of the ones that we've really been campaigning on is pay inequality and pay transparency. Just people are paid completely different rates. None of it is out in the open, and we can't really even begin to talk about that pay inequality until everyone knows what they're being paid. So it's a really big it's a small campaign in a way, and it's a small question to ask, but it has potentially like huge ramifications. So it seems like a good place to start for us. I don't know if Amy, you had, if you were going to come in on something.
Yeah, I think that I suppose like I've been working with game workers now for about a year. So I suppose like from our perspective and how we kind of see it is that like with the decline of worker power over the past however many decades that it's been going on, unfortunately they've been successive. That's what has kind of happened is that there has been a kind of shift and in terms of like contradiction. So I think there's a certain level of expectation now that people have when they go into workplaces that maybe aren't being met. So, you know, like you have a case where people are graduating or maybe they're not, but people are going into the games industry and they're kind of thinking, oh, well, I thought this was a good job. But then they get there and they're like, oh, wait, hang on a minute. The bosses have unilateral control of this workplace. There's no workplace democracy. There's no transparency. There's like a culture of, you know, individualization and blame. And like, it's just a really like, I think it's gotten to the stage, and certainly in Ireland, at least, like where people are kind of starting to say across all aspects of their lives, but certainly in the workplace, that they're kind of starting to say, well, no, like this has gone a little bit too far now. And I think individually, each person that I've spoken to and who I've worked with, they all have their own individual motivations and their own individual stories that have motivated them to decide that they want to build a union and take that risk. But ultimately, there's a realization that to achieve things and to you know, make the lives of working people and their communities better, that we need to start working collectively rather than individually. So it's the difference between, you know, reading one of these magazine articles about how can I go in and negotiate a pay increase for myself. It's like, no, hang on, how are we going to all go in and negotiate a pay increase together for all of us? And I think there's just been a kind of like attitude shift towards that. You know, it's like, why is there no democracy in workplaces? And I think in games, that's really evident. That attitude is like really, really prevalent.
Yeah, Emma, you had your hand up to say something.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm a little sick, so my voice is a little rough. But yeah, I mean, as a former game worker myself, you know, I've gone through the exact process Amy's mentioned, where you know, working in games was a dream job, and to get into it, you know, I was happy to take whatever the job was, whatever the hours were, whatever the pay was, just to get my foot in the door, right? But at some point, you know, that kind of shiny appeal of the industry starts to kind of fade away over time as you realize that there's huge amounts of people who are dropping out of the industry from just sheer burnout, the fact that you can't have oftentimes a long-term stable professional career where you can actually have a family and plan for retirement and have a stable employment situation, right? And I think, you know, there's definitely these bread and butter kind of day-to-day improvements we'd like to see, I think, as game workers, but it's also just about respect and having professionalization and dignity on the job, I think. And sometimes that gets missed in conversations. And I like what Amy was saying about, you know, having democracy at the workplace. You know, I think in general, the game industry can be really individualizing and kind of pit people against each other and feel like you have to kind of scrape your way to the top, I guess, to make it through. And I think a much better way would be to be supportive and collaborative with one another to raise everyone's conditions up, right? That helps everybody. And I also think it kind of doesn't have to be a foreign concept, because in the industry, we have just a huge variety of different disciplines that work together, whether it's like art or writing or design, programming, audio, QA testing, community management. I mean, you name it. We have a huge number of different types of people with all kinds of skill sets in this industry. We know how to collaborate. We make billion-dollar games that have just huge teams of people across not just countries, but you know, across whole continents working on them. And you would think we'd be able to get together and improve our workplace and improve our say in how our games are made too. So I think it's a really natural next step in the kind of development of our medium, frankly.
Yeah, as you say, there's such a broad range of people there, and like a broad range of what we might traditionally describe as different classes across the industry as well. And although some of them are quite well compensated financially, others are absolutely not, and the conditions are terrible. And there's like an opportunity there to bring so many different people together, and some have power and some don't, and that some of the actions of the powerless are gonna compel those who have more influence or more power or more privilege in their companies to rise that tide, to raise all boats. Magnus, you had your pen in the air. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I agree really with what you are saying, but I think the games industry really, in a lot of ways, an amazing industry. It's fast growing. It's I mean, a lot of people are still loving the way they are able to express their creativity, but still the industry, I would say, suffers from a lot of like childhood diseases, since it's very fast growing. And that includes like many core union issues, such as excessive overtime, lack of influence and transparency, poor plans for parental leave, lack of diversity, and so forth. And I think unionized sector is a great way to help like shed light and rectify some of those problems, especially through like collective bargaining agreements and through influence in decision making.
Yeah. Agreed. Wes, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, no, this has all been really great. I think, maybe from just a sort of a more macro perspective, right? And Carrie touched on this a little bit. I mean, in terms of the entertainment sector, this is the fastest growing space, right? This is sort of the future. And to Emma's point, there's such a vertical in the game sector where you have such a wide variety of job titles that are represented, and it is sort of, a last bastion of, creative work that you can get paid for. And so I say all that to say that if this sector isn't organized, if there isn't workplace democracy, if these workers that trend younger aren't able to have power in the coming generation, it's just going to mean, a total erosion of material gains of workers abroad, right? As its industry continues to sort of grow exponentially.
Yeah, well, to move on from that briefly, I think we all are clear on why there needs to be further unionization and organizing. I just wanted to ask everyone what they have done so far. So I know there's going to be different stories from all the different countries here, partially because of different labor laws, partially because of the size of the industry, partially just because of different kind of cultural things about trade unionism. It would be really interesting to hear, what's happened so far. Can I come to you, Amy, first? Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. So, an initial kind of like, for me, I suppose like it's been a baptism of fire working with game workers in a very positive way. I shouldn't say fire, I should say something else. Yeah, very, very powerful experience. So what I've been doing with workers so far, what workers have been doing, what I've been supporting them to do has been to really just to start to systemically look at their workplace structures, okay? So like over the past like 10 months, they've really honed in on workplace organizing and how they're going to do that. So really developing strategy, developing plans, how to win. And essentially the strategy, like for us so far, has been to just build density, because like, like for anybody that wants to win a union, because that's what you're doing in an ununionized sector, for anybody who wants to win, who wants their demands to be heard, density is the only resource that you have and that you can rely on. That's the only weapon that working class people have is their numbers. So really the focus has been so far to build in a number of workplaces. And I think it's really interesting what Emma said, which is that, there's kind of a predisposition almost for collaborative working within the industry, because like, when I'm working with game workers, they just get it, you know, they're just like, oh yeah, no, I know I have to talk to every single one of my coworkers. I know I have to do that. And I know that if we want to win, we have to convince them all. So like, it's actually been like a very, very positive experience so far. And yeah, the strategy is just to build density so, you know, that they can start making some serious demands. In terms of the law in Ireland, I can speak briefly to that just here, just because I know there's different contexts. So we're quite unlucky in that our industrial relations legislation is, in my opinion at least, very, very bad. We have a voluntarist model, which means that the employer can opt in or out of trade union recognition. There's no clear path for workers to win, because essentially, you know, you can say, well, I want my union recognised, and the employer just doesn't have to show up. So if you look at the Irish context, there have been workers in places like Lloyd's Pharmacy. That was a huge dispute that happened a few years ago, where essentially the employer just basically just doesn't show up. So I think that now, really what like the Irish trade union movement and what game workers as a result have learned from that experience is that to win, they're gonna have to build super majorities. So that's essentially what's been going on over here at least. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar here. The fact that it's completely voluntary recognition, that sucks. That sucks.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's great if there is. We have it slightly different, where there is. It's better for relations if a company decides to recognise voluntary, but if not, there is a legal route that we can go down, but you need to get well, it's slightly complicated depending on the size of your company, but yeah, we have another recourse to that. But our strategies have been the same. I think it's just, yeah, like you say, build up that density, and it's really, it's an interesting problem in a way, because there's almost two cultures that are competing. Where one, in the UK, you've got a kind of strong tradition of trade unionism up until the 70s or so, and as you say, it's been beaten down ever since, but is definitely growing back at the moment. So we've got that like strong history of it there, but then in the games and tech industry, there, because of the complete lack of it, there's almost a it's just a lack of consciousness about the movement, really. And when I've gone into workplaces, I've expected to be met with I suppose suspicion from management or even from workers, and there hasn't been any of that really, but there has been much more very kind of basic education about what a union does and why it's needed in the industry, and I'm absolutely happy to provide that, but it was just surprising. So like you say, the density is the most important thing in a way, because we just need to increase that the normalization of unions in the industry, and then, you know, as you get more young people coming into the industry and going to places like Code Clan, we've got here, it's like a coding school. If you can talk about unions in those coding schools as just a regular part of the industry in the same way that they are with more established industries, then it's just going to be, you know, it's going to be such a win for everyone in the industry already, and everyone kind of coming up through it. I don't know, does anyone else want to come in on what did Magnus? Yeah, did you want to say something about what your?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know, but Sweden has a really strong tradition of labor unions.
Yeah.
We have like 70% are members of a union in the workforce, and 90% are covered by a collective bargaining agreement. But in the games industry, that is not the case. We have 30% that are members of a union. That's still high in an international comparison, obviously, but for us, it's really low, and that's a big problem. Now, on the organizing part, we have been focusing on recruiting members, recruiting local union reps, with the main goal of signing a collective bargaining agreement. So to some extent that has been successful. It's still a problem that so few companies have a collective bargaining agreement. It's only a handful in Sweden. But more are getting on board, but it's a slow process. We've also started doing more lobbying and PR on a more industry-wide level, writing op-eds in industry media, writing a report on the challenges in the industry and how we should approach it. And this to some extent in order to get the employees in the industry to understand that we know the challenges they are facing, but also to let the employers know that we are not, turning a blind eye to any problems that they are causing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. We've been, in terms of the tech industry, we've been doing a similar thing. We're talking about AI and surveillance in every company at the moment, I suppose. So it's interesting how issues that begin in games and especially in tech then lead out into every other part of the industry. It was one of our kind of key organizing goals, I suppose, at the beginning, is to probably quite a utopian idea in a way, is that if we can organize developers, then they have such a strong influence on the future of work for people in every other industry. So it can be something that can nearly said trickle down there, but we're not gonna trickle down economics is obviously not something that we're a big fan of. But yeah, there's a way that people in positions of power and positions of influence, and developers are in such a unique position in that way, can affect the working lives of so many people. I don't know if Wes or Emma, you wanted to talk about any of the experiences you've had so far.
Sure, and honestly, I think it's dangerous to talk about macroeconomics because that's typically where Wes and I go during our weekly and daily sync-ups. I think it's a big part of this, actually. So I do think it is something people should understand, that overall the workforce generally in post-industrial societies is moving towards service, intellectual work, and tech-based work, right? And as that becomes more and more, dominant practice, we need to be organizing in tech in this way. So I do think it is important really to note that. But, in terms of, things that are going on, we are not at a 30% unionization rate like our friends in Sweden are, unfortunately, but, we're going to get there one day. I think it's important to think of the US industry as being very early on, really trying to build that first foundation of just getting folks to understand the concept of organizing, why it's important, and it really even just how to go about it and how frankly normal and human of a process it can be. I find, especially here in the US, where so much of our media and culture and politics has just a completely vehemently anti-union mythology and discourse and culture, there's a lot of myths to unpack for people, and people tend to have this really big, scary concept of what organizing and being in a union means for them. When really, at the end of the day, it's just talking to your coworkers and friends and asking about what issues they care about, what do they struggle with, day to day, and also what do they like about the company, what do they like about their jobs and want to protect from future encroaching, slipping conditions and corporatization and things, right? So it's a much more human and personal and emotional process than I think people realize. It's not just waving a flag and storming the barricades, right? So I think that's a lot of the work that we've been up to lately. Of course, in terms of, public notable things, obviously, some time ago, the riot workers fought back against forced arbitration, which was this big practice of essentially silencing folks who wanted to take the company to court over things like abuse or discrimination or harassment, typically affecting marginalized people most directly. And that was a huge effort and a huge win, and I know they continue to organize. I think we continue to see things where either big kind of harassment or toxic workplace culture things come out into the press or get leaked out online, and people are having more and more robust conversations about what it means to be a worker in the industry, and that people really shouldn't have to put up with shit anymore. And I think that's a qualitative cultural shift that we're seeing that will enable a whole lot of really good organizing in the future as people have higher expectations, more professional expectations of working in this industry. And I think, the last thing I would mention, and Wes can talk more about this, is, we just had our 3-week-long strike by some game writers for a company called Voltage. In fact, actually, one of them is based in Ireland and is a member of FSU, which we think is just wonderful. There are these wonderful women and non-binary LGBTQ folks of color who write for this romance mobile game, and they went on a 3-week-long strike. 21 out of 20 of one of the writers got together, and they were super unified, super compassionate towards each other, and they were able to win an average of 78% pay increase, which is huge. And I think it also, in my opinion, almost kind of more importantly, they had a huge qualitative shift in how they felt about their work, because where they were kind of previously these kind of siloed off independent contractors, now they all know each other. They're not like mysterious usernames on a company chat, service, right? They're like people who they know and they can talk to. And that changes how you feel about your workplace when you have such an intimate connection and you've been through something so difficult and trying as a 3-week-long strike. And so, yeah, I think that's just a wonderful, huge step. And I would say it's the first public union in the US and Canadian games industry to actually have like a workplace shop. They're not recognized. They didn't go through the kind of United States' typical legal recognition process, but they are a union. They really are. Because, at the end of the day, any group of workers coming together to improve the workplace and stand up for each other and actually succeeding in that, that's a union. I don't care if you're legally recognized or not, that is the case. And so I think that's a huge thing worth noting. And I think also it's worth noting, like, there's been a huge amount of organizing in this industry that doesn't get seen actually here in the US. Countless examples of departments or teams or studios taking collective action on issues and winning on issues, on a piece-by-piece rate. Maybe they haven't organized a full-on union and maybe they're not public about those successes, but there's tons of stories like that, both from like studios I've personally worked at in the past and, many that I have friends and peers who work at different studios where that's happened. So I think it's also important to note that if folks aren't seeing like super public, like, press releases or social media like announcements of big wins, there's also always every day stuff like that happening on the shop floor, on the day-to-day, because anywhere where people face some level of exploitation or oppression, there's always people fighting back against that, even if it's not in as unified and powerful a way as it could be.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And it's really important to highlight both of those things, that it's such organizing is such a human act. And, I've learned in my other life as a trade union convener, just in the workplace, I did know a handful of people there, and then over the course of a few years, being more involved with the trade union there, I know close to all of the people who work in the company, like 300 people, and you learn all about their lives, you learn about their stories, and you do just you ask people questions that you would think otherwise would be none of your business, or that people would be private about, but people want to talk to you, and it's such a wonderful way to interact with each other. And yeah, to your other point, so much of unionization and organizing happens in the workplace and is small and is kind of slow work, but really like endlessly important, and not everything can be a massive story, and not everything has to be a massive story, and it would be kind of weird if it was, because not everything is for the newspapers, I suppose. But but in another way, it's like following the recent success that was that you guys had. It was amazing just to watch it on Twitter and see how organized they were, and yeah, like you say, how they all came together and it was a huge success. 78% on it. That's It's a big win. It's a big win. Carrie, you had your hand up a little while ago. I don't know if you had something to say.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to relate to what Emma was saying about, you know, the growing mentality and basically I want to say consciousness, not just like a group consciousness, but the personal consciousness that games employees are workers also, and the realization has come there. They're not entrepreneurs or freelancers or whatever. I remember I'm coming originally from Finland, so we have a similar system like Magnus in Sweden, and but games workers haven't been organized in a long time. And I remember in Rovio when they had a huge layoffs. I think that was in 2016. There was a big realization amongst that group that actually we're workers and we have similar problems, and we need the union also to help us in these problems. But you know, it's been a long road, and looking at the road, it, of course, depends on how far you want to go. If you can go all the way back to like 1979, when IBMers started protesting against the apartheid system in South Africa, when IBM computers were used in South Africa for their passbook system of identification and control, and all the way from there, there's been like a lot of things happening. If you look at, of course, the big boom of tech organizing, I guess that started, you have to say, in USA with the election of the current president, who invited the tech CEOs into his tower for the so-called tech summit, which was, I guess, a breaking point for many people, and left a lot of people disillusioned seeing their CEOs shaking hands and being in a photo shoot with this president. Although for minorities, for example, I guess the dark side of these companies had been quite visible for a long time already. But I guess it has become now more systematic, and the organizing has become more in-depth and more effective, and that's why we're seeing so much in media also what's happening, and of course media has also taken a lot of interest, so it's become more visible, and that means that there is like this movement growing. The employees are themselves seeing that, okay, other people are having similar problems, maybe we need to start doing something about it. Sorry about the lighting. I'm gonna close the drapes.
Oh, beautiful day over there. Yeah, I mean, it's well, I was going to kind of use that to jump onto the next point we were going to talk about, was like how, in the same way that you mentioned that you know, it was a kind of wake-up call for some people in America, but not so much for certain minorities in America and for people who had been discriminated against before. I think that's something that's been common amongst all of us doing organizing work across the games industry, is that the workers in workplaces who are kind of leading that charge are people of color, are people from the LGBTQ community, are people who have been otherwise disenfranchised and know what that work is from a life of experience of it. So I guess I want to ask everyone what the well, both as organizers, like who you have had success speaking to, and then if people are in their workplaces in the games industry looking to start to organize their games industry, or the industry as a whole, but also just their workplace, who should they talk to? How should they start? What should they do? Where can they go? You can pick any or all of these questions. Does anyone want to jump in? Yeah, Wes, go ahead. Yeah,
Emma talked about the voltage writers, but you know, I've been organizing unions for almost a decade and a half, and they taught me a lot, right? From the moment when I met the first worker and we hopped on Zoom, you know, she didn't know anybody else at the workplace at that point. She just communicated with a couple over Discord. And then, you know, systematically, we talked about, all right, well, how do we reach out to a couple of them on Discord? And then a following week, you know, there were 5 workers on the Zoom call. And then we talked more about reaching out, and before you know it, you know, they had all 21 on board and ready to take aggressive action. And what I would say, and anyone can do that, right? Anybody if they're motivated and you really want to make change in your workplace, you can do that. And the second thing that I would say that I learned a lot about this is Emma said, you know, they were all women or non-binary. Most of them were queer. They were, you know, marginalized already. And I think because of that, when they went on strike and the strike got really hard, and there's this moment, you know, especially in America, to get individualistic and have your fear and anxieties, you know, present that way, they actually turned inward and, you know, really got through their strike at the dullest times and toughest times because they were there for each other, right? It really became more about like the person, you know, virtually next to you than it did about them individually. And that's what they were saying to us, not, you know, that's not like an observation. That was coming straight from them. So I think that part is key. And, you know, in terms of what the next steps are, you know, with Code in the US, Code CWA, we have weekly trainings that we do on the weekends that anyone can register for that's interested in organizing and can meet other workers that have been organizing. And we've been doing those for almost 6 months at this point, you know, every other weekend. And so, you know, that's what I would say. I'd say reach out, start talking to like, you know, someone that you know at work or someone that on your team and get it going.
Hey, great. Anyone else want to come in on experiences organizing so far, or who they should contact, or what like should be the first steps? I guess I agree with Wes that, yeah, that's we're holding some just organizing trainings just for like the basics for anyone who wants to jump in. But there is yeah, I mean, we'll come on to this a bit later, but I suppose the process of organizing has been turned on its head a little bit during lockdown, and it's yeah, the importance of that physical interaction with people when you are organizing has had to be completely reconfigured. But it's kind of amazing that Voltage managed to do that so quickly and to really turn that to their advantage. Amy, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, if there's anybody that will be watching that is working in the games industry, I think the first thing that anybody can do as any worker in any industry is reach out to a trade union organizer. I don't say that because I think that, you know, I don't think that trade union organizers are I mean, I'm biased, but I don't think they know everything. But,
yeah, we do. We're the best. We've got it all.
But no. But what I would say is reach out because the support is there. Don't be scared. Have an open mind, and just reach out to your union organizer, and then just see what happens. Like, I mean, like, to be honest, I think that, like, from my own experience, I've met workers last year, okay, who were so scared, who were like, oh my God, will this ever work? None of my coworkers are going to get on board. And like, now they're committed activists and they're like on committees and they're like driving, organizing. And like Emma said something earlier about like organizing being an emotional process. Something that we don't talk a lot about in unions, but I mean, it really, really is, because it's it's feeling the fear and then just taking the leap and just doing it and seeing what happens. Like, that's like it essentially. So like, for anybody that is interested in getting involved and building a union in their workplace, reach out to your union organizer, don't be scared, and just see what happens. That's what I would say.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we're not scary. Yeah, we literally want to talk to you. And yeah, I mean, that's the basis of all of it. You don't have to, as soon as you start, one of us are not going to, you know, put a little Marxist hat on you and send you to the front lines. It's all, you know, well, Amy is. But yeah, it all starts somewhere, and it's infectious. You know, I think we've probably have all come up through that initial conversation or an initial thought of, you know, something here isn't fair, something here isn't right, and then it's become such a huge part of our lives, not because it, you know, needed to be, but because, and well, it did need to be, but that, you know, that it becomes infectious, and that drive, yeah, becomes, you know, a kind of defining and important part of why you live your life, and it can be, you know, incredibly enriching as much as it can get you down because of the nature capitalism. You've got an incredibly strong network, a global network that we've got here of people who can support you and who you can talk to. And it's incredibly strong and it's incredibly uplifting. And when you do, you know, it is an emotional process, but you come out of it with, you know, friends who you'll always like share something with. Emma, did you have something you wanted to come in on?
Yeah, you know, listening to you and Amy kind of sparked something. You know, I think multiple of us have said throughout this panel that literally anyone can organize and everyone should be involved with it. I want to really underline that, actually, like literally anyone. I don't care who you are. I don't care what job you have. I don't care what your form of employment are. You can organize, like really. If you work for someone, if you have a boss, if you have a company that you're beholden to, you can organize and you can make connections with folks. Whether you feel like you don't know anyone in your company or you're the social butterfly on your team, you know, I think whether you're a AAA worker, mobile games, VR, indie, a freelancer, it does not matter. Permatemp, you know, it doesn't matter. People should reach out and get involved. You know, I've seen, you know, I think a trend of, you know, I think marginalized folks and sensitive kind of actually introvert folks being kind of really amazing organizers, because I think that emotional quality is there. But I've seen literally all kinds of people be amazing. Even, you know, like conservative folks who most people would say, oh, well, they wouldn't want a union. But, you know, I've seen amazing people, you know, regardless of political stances or, you know, experience with unions or anything like that, just be wonderful organizers. Because at the end of the day, do you want better conditions? Do you want to protect the things you like about your job? Do you like your coworkers? Or maybe even if you don't like your coworkers, do you feel like they should have a better workplace, right? If you care about those things and about career and about your professionalism in the industry, you can organize. And I just cannot say that enough. And yeah, when it comes to, you know, Canada and the United States, people can reach out to Wes and I, and we have a whole team of organizers who can help out. You know, code-cwa.org is where people can find us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, completely. Like there's, I think there is from outside the movement a perception that we want to destroy everything, but it's really like people get involved in unions because a lot of the time it's because they love the place that they work and they want to make everything about it better, and they want to be you know, amplify the things that make them proud about it, and to you know, be able to say that to other people, like, you know, it's an amazing place to work, we've got this and this, we've got fair work, we've got equality across the board, everyone is paid fairly, you know, we get great holidays, there's yeah, I mean, it's just you want to unite that kind of part of your life that is spent working with the part of your life that believes things should be, you know, ethical and just, and that everyone should be treated fairly. So I might just, we've still got a little bit of time left. I just wanted to maybe wrap up by asking everyone about lockdown and their kind of digital experiences of organizing. I suppose for us, I mean, to be completely honest, a lot of our organizing was, when we started organizing with games and tech workers, I imagined a lot of it would be online. But when we actually began to do it properly, the initial conversations were online, but there was a real like thirst to meet in groups in physical locations in person, which was in some ways very comforting for me, because that's how we kind of came up as organizers, you know, meeting people in physical spaces. And it's still that incredibly important moment of when someone comes to meet you, or you kind of meet them for a coffee, or you meet them in the workplace, and just by meeting them you kind of cross that threshold into saying, okay, yeah, I'm ready to do something, or I'm interested in enough to come and have that conversation. So when lockdown happened, some of our digital, we converted all the meetups to digital, and they were not as we didn't get as many people coming to them as we did otherwise. But I mean, everyone had so many pressures on them, and with everything happening online and everything on Zoom and Meet and all of the other platforms that are available, I think some of that got lost in the white noise. But the advantages of that is that we were also invited to speak at other meetups, so we got a chance to speak to communities that we hadn't managed to talk to before, because their same meetups were kind of going, didn't have the numbers either. So everyone was trying to inject some kind of interest that they didn't have otherwise. So it's been a real advantage for us in that way to be able to travel, wherever in Scotland or in the UK or in terms of this across the world, to speak to communities that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. And we also, the Scottish government is very open to unions, and we have something called the Fair Work Framework, which is all about kind of putting unions and normalizing unionization in a lot of industries. So we worked with them on the guidance for safe return to the workplace. And when we were doing that, we had a kind of open forum with tech workers where we said, look, we've got this straight path to power. We can, what do you want us to talk about? What do you want to have in your workplace to feel safe? And what other issues can we piggyback on the back of this meeting with ministers in order to get into the conversation there? So it's, in some ways it's made us unable to have contact with people, but in other ways it's really reduced distance and distance, geographically, but also that distance to power has kind of, you can, everyone's in their house, everyone's got a couch behind them and a cat that jumps up on their screen. Everyone is leveled, and it's really, really useful to have those conversations when you can really see the humanity behind someone. Yeah, so that's been our experience. I don't know if anyone else has had any good things or bad things about having to organize digitally that they want to talk about. If someone puts their hand up, I'm gonna pick up someone. Okay, Emma put her hand up.
Yeah, I think the transition to work from home was a bit rocky. I think at first, in particular, like you'd think you would weather it a little bit better because, game workers and tech workers, we tend to be very, already connected online and kind of outside of meet space, I guess. But it definitely did present an obstacle, and I think not all of our organizing committees at the time made it through that transition. Some really just couldn't make that jump. They lost steam, not being able to meet in person and talk to people on the shop floor and stuff like that. That being said, I think the ones who did make it through were really strengthened by that experience. And I think kind of like what you're getting to, Mike, I think COVID has provided just definitely plenty of obstacles to organizing, between, having just burdens on people's time and people having to deal with family issues and all kinds of things. But it's also presented a lot of opportunities, at least for us. I mean, one is, like we've said, earlier, the basis of organizing is really just reaching out and communicating to your coworkers and caring about them and learning about them. And there's pretty much no better premise than an international pandemic where you haven't seen your coworkers in months and months, to just be able to message someone and be like, hey man, I haven't seen you in like 3 months. We should have a catch-up call sometime. I would love to check in with you and see how you're doing, right? And then you can have, it's a perfect introduction to having those kind of conversations that we're talking about. And I also think, a lot of companies that I've seen, during this transition to working from home have completely failed to kind of keep up the kind of, I don't know, like the kind of social bonding, the social glue of the workplace. Like there's less of those kind of in-person activities and things that keep people socially together. And I think that can be an opportunity actually, because if you're organizing committee, and when I say that, I mean the workers who are active in building a union in their workplace, if they can step up and fill that kind of vacuum and be a social connective kind of group, and a group that brings people together and keeps people in touch and checks in on each other and has like social events, even if it's online together, that can be a wonderful boost to your organizing, because, you know, like we've been saying, it's human, it's social, it's connective, it's you know, communicative. So it definitely, it's, you know, a double-edged sword to be sure, but you know, I think that there's definitely opportunities to be had with this tricky new era of online organizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree completely. Like the unions have really carried that weight of I don't know, you know, emotional labor, just asking people how they are. I mean, that's something that the companies have really dropped the ball with in general, is keeping up with people's mental health and how, you know, how they're faring. And it's something that, yeah, a lot of the workers I've been working with, you know, they're the first to ask that. And we've people in different organizing committees, they're just building in, as well as talking about all of the health and safety things that are going on. They've been building in time to just, you know, catch up with each other, make sure everyone's doing okay. And it's just something that would otherwise be missing from that corporate space. And it's incredibly important. And it's something that, you know, organizing and talking to your fellow workers and colleagues, you can provide that. And yeah, and it can be the beginning of a organizing conversation, or it can be just, you know, something else. It can be, but, you know, it's a really important part of the process. I don't know if anyone else had any. Wes wants to jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much more to add from what Emma said, but just that the one thing we've seen, I think, is that a lot more workers initially are more comfortable, I think, doing one-on-ones than traditionally, because there isn't the risk at the workplace of like ever running into a manager, right? Like no one's going to get in the Zoom call. So in the double-edged sword, I would say that I think on, you know, some of the committees, especially the ones that we've started up since COVID, people are like more ready to do one-on-ones, and I think there's like this leveling of anxiety that's stripped away. You know, being remotely, which obviously, you know, is a huge benefit. If you can, you know, have more conversations early on in your campaign, you know, you can jumpstart it a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, well, we're coming up to the end of our time, so I might wrap it up there. Oh, Magnus, you want to jump in and say something?
Yeah, just a quick one. Yeah, for us, it's obviously, it's not going to be the same as if you're meeting in person. I think, like in the meeting from us as a union to our members or the local union reps. So we have used many different approaches to organizing in the past, you know, whether it's through newsletters or standing outside the office offering cake, you know, and some of that is impossible, some of it's still possible. But there are always going to be that special aspect of meeting someone in person that is missing, I think. And also we have had to like limit campaigning as well during this crisis, and I think yeah, it's a shame, but it's understandable as well, obviously.
And Carrie, sorry, I missed you as well. I'm being a bad host.
No problem. Thanks, Mike. We're living in a digitalized world, and this seminar and this talks can be watched by anybody from around the world. So I think it's important to notice that you know, we work everywhere. This is a global movement, and sometimes it might be difficult to start, especially during this COVID era. A lot of workers are inundated with the work, and they don't have time or energy maybe left to plan and execute organizing activities. But if you're working in the games industry, remember that there's no workplace too small or a company too big to start a union and to get organized. And we love to help you. We in Uni Global, we work everywhere in the world. We work directly with the unions. We provide support and training to unions, even in countries, you know, where unions have been almost non-existent for a long time, in countries in Eastern Europe, in the Balkan countries, and everywhere in the world. And we're seeing new unions being born all the time. Like we just had the Nexon Union being found up in South Korea. And if there is no union, or you don't know if there's a union, you can ask me, kari.lübeck@uniglobalunion.org, or any one of us in this panel. So this is, this is a global movement. There are no borders when it comes to workers getting unionized, and we all work together to create a better working environment in the games industry and get all the game workers unified in one front. So we're here for you.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I'll put everyone's contact details in a slide just after we finish speaking, and there'll be links to all of our websites, and I assume everyone's got got a Twitter account as well. We'll put everything on there at the end, so you can contact any of us. And yeah, don't worry if you're not sure if there is a union in your country. We can any of us can point you in the right direction for that. Yeah, and Kari's in a great position to do that. Yeah, I mean, I know there's been some huge success stories in Romania where there hasn't been much organizing before, and they're really making waves. But yeah, if there's not a union, we can help you sort that out, and if there is, we can point in the right direction. And if the union is one of us, then we can get going straight away. So if you are in America, Ireland, Sweden, Switzerland, or Scotland, you can talk to one of us. Right, okay, I better wrap it up there, just so we don't go over time. Thanks to everyone on the panel for coming to do this. A few of you I just met for the first time, and it's been great, and it would have been not possible without this. It's been really interesting and useful to talk to you, and I really hope everyone watching this can take something out of it. And I think one of the things that's really come through this conversation is, one, that organizing is like a radically human act and an emotional act. Two, as Emma said, anyone can organize, just to make sure that's underlined. Even if you think you can't, or if you think it's not for you. Yeah, we've all seen people from so many different walks of life, and from introverts, extroverts. Everyone really has something in them, and not everyone has to do the same job. There's so many things you can do as an organizer, and it's exactly the fact that you do have those differences that is the strength of the entire movement. It wouldn't be anything without you. Yeah, to wrap it up, I was going to write an outro, but I just got a note here that says, if anyone's watching. That's not an outro, but I'm sure a bunch of people are. And thanks all for coming. I'll put all the links up to the end after this. But for now, goodbye, and enjoy the rest of PAX and EGX.